In this lecture, let's explore the idea of a variable. At the moment, our code doesn't do anything. I think it would be interesting if we started to store data in our objects. C# allows us to store data within an object with a feature called variables. A variable is a way to store information in an object. For example, let's say we created a character in a game. We can store the stats of a character in a variable, such as their health, speed, and defense. We can define as many variables as we want in a class. A common analogy is to think of variables as empty boxes. Within these boxes, we can store anything. C# is considered to be a statically typed language. What does that mean? Sounds like a loaded term. In general, programs must store data. They can store numbers, addresses, and other miscellaneous information. If we're working on a program, we'll most likely be dealing with many changes to our data. This is especially true for video games. If you have a character that moves, their position is an example of data we would store in a variable. Their position can constantly change. Thus, our variables are continually being updated. We may encounter issues whenever updating data. The position of a character should be stored as a number. But what if we accidentally update the position to the name of the character? How is your game supposed to respond to that? It would result in errors. Accidentally assigning the wrong value to a variable is a common mistake. Types prevent this issue because it tells our program or game the type of data that can be stored in a variable. If we attempt to store text in a variable that only accepts numbers, our program will prevent this process from happening. It can even tell us ahead of time. Nothing is worse than building a game and playing it for a few minutes, only to find we stored the wrong type of data in a variable. By setting the data type, Visual Studio Code can catch errors ahead of time. It's a huge time saver. Data types refer to the type of data stored in a variable. You can think of it as a way to categorize data. There are various types of data available. For this course, we're going to focus on 4 data types. They're called int, float, string, and bool. Int is short for integer. It allows us to store whole numbers. Float can also store numbers, but with decimal values. Afterward, the string data type can be used for storing multiple characters. Lastly, the bool data type is short for Boolean. It can store the state of something. There are only 2 possible values for a Boolean value. They're true or false. For example, we can store the state of an item. Has the player used an item already? We can store that type of information as a Boolean value. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to a complete list of data types available. Initially, this may feel overwhelming. Luckily, you can get away with using a handful of data types. Throughout the course, we're going to be using 4 data types from the list. Enough talk. Let's create some variables. In the next lecture, let's start writing variables for our robots.